Hello there, welcome back to TAP, Therapeutic Astrology Podcast with me, Mana. I hope you remember a little bit. It's been a while, I guess we can call it a summer break, but I just got exhausted, honestly. And now I'm back to check in with you because next week I'm gonna start to do some interviews, so you get a mix of voices and opinions and energies. And the topic is, well, I guess therapy and astrology, and then some of my favorite traumas. And of course the survival and overcoming of these traumas against the odds. Or maybe, we're starting to realize that the odds, are pretty good to overcome these things as we continue to support each other and inform each other. So I really love conversations like that, as interviews, because our perspectives are, emerging from relationships, I think. I know mine have a lot. And so it's emerging from relationships, new acknowledgements, new perspectives, and also just this comfort from our common humanity, yet differences in interests and intelligence and age and life purpose and destiny, all of that. So I like that I can find something out about me from these relationships, and I like that we are at the same level. That's what I think. I'm hesitating a bit if you can hear it in my voice, but the reason I'm hesitating is that these are people who've studied much longer than I, who's much further than I and all of that. But they are talking to you and me on an equal basis. Of course, as a teacher, as a mentor, but it's not like, oh, they've done so well and maybe they can help a poor thing like you. That's not who I talk to, and that's not how I talk to them. At least not anymore. I want to say I used to interview. I've said that before here in Denmark, and I've learned a lot of lessons from that. That's something that can make you grow. Because I don't want to live that life in so much distress anymore that I did when I was juggling weekly interviews and going to places to interview people every week. I just even just naming that, I feel that in my stomach right now. Anxiousness, that was a lot of pressure to put on myself. So the interviews I'll start to do next week, and I'm not this sort of podcaster who's doing it and then publishing them. Of course I have to do them and then publish them. Kind of have to do it in that order, but I don't record a whole season and then publish it is what I meant. But I do it as we go. So after the first one, you'll be able to hear the first one, and then like that. So from next week, I definitely vow to myself that I will not look down to myself. I will not, underestimate who I am and what I have just because I look up to someone else, which is a natural thing to do. Because it's been stressful, and for years it has made me this feeling around who I am in relationship to someone who's done so well. Has made me overcompensate, tighten up my body, and leave my own needs for sure. Just like a religious trauma reflex. If you know what I mean. I don't know if that's a term, but a religious trauma reflex, just used in another setting, with this, as we do with strategies. I mean, the reflex is around overcompensating, tightening up, doing, I have to read this book even if I'm up all night because I want to impress the person I'm interviewing. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to enjoy the process. And I'm not gonna be. I will not have read the books for these people beforehand, and I'm gonna choose to be okay with that. I can feel the old tension coming up speaking about it, but then I feel more of something else. I feel more settled in, no, this is the right thing for me to live like that. Might be right for someone else to do it in a completely different way, but for me it needs to be very easeful, and we need to look at each other as just human beings, teaching, helping each other. So I'm reminding us about that before the topic of another self-defeating behavior of food addiction, which I'll be speaking about today, because we all have symptoms. If we open our eyes, we all have symptoms, and in a way I want to normalize that. Like it's normal, but also it shouldn't be a but. And I also want to, at the same time, invite us to examine the causes of the symptoms. What's the underlying needs? And so for me, it has been a food and sugar addiction, so that's the theme. But I realize that there can be many other addictions out there. So you can try and translate it into whatever is your attached object. You have attached some hopes and illusions to this object or this substance. And for me, I'll say food, I'll say sugar. That's kind of just how I'm gonna name it. And it's an exciting theme, but I've told myself today, you're gonna make it short, because otherwise you'll be spending months and months on trying to get something out here after the summer break. And it doesn't work, because I now actually have a deadline, because I'll be doing the interviews next week, and I wanted to just let you know that there's going to be that change, because up until now it's been monologues, just me. And I'm excited to see how interviewing in English is going to be. Interesting. I'm just here with a little bit, but this theme can be looked at from many different perspectives. So I'll just present you with some of those perspectives, the reflections that are like closest to my heart, what I normally think about these issues. So I have been highly addicted to sugar all my life. And what first comes to mind when wanting to explain that is, well, my mother was also addicted to both a lot of food and a lot of sugar. And then the culture around us in society at large, I'm thinking, we are eating quite unhealthy. It's kind of encouraged. I mean, I know you could be in a part of society, you could choose to stream only from some channels which has healthy food, but I want to say that our culture at large is encouraging unhealthy eating most of the time, unless there is this obesity, and then that's its own theme, and I'm actually not really speaking to that, even though that's really interesting too, that people then can be very judgmental and have many rules and feel very comfortable about what they know about what overweight people should do with their bodies. But that's, again, not really the theme here. And then I've also played with this thought that when we, as religious people, had to suppress so much pleasure, and I can tell you that is quite the signature in my chart if we are talking about prior lives, the suppression of pleasure, well, then maybe sugar was one of the only or at least not directly sinful pleasures that you could partake in. I'm just thinking, what are the explanations? Why have I been addicted to sugar my whole life? It could have to do with this pious religion that I was brought up in. We're not talking about conscious choices here, because then it would be easy to explain. We're like talking about what's beneath, why, what's the cause of these automatic, well, yeah, now I say automatic personality, but actually I could also say that maybe I just have an addictive personality that could, again, stem maybe from prior lives. And all of that can be true, and there can be many other explanations. So what's important is to look at what's causing it right now, and how can I be with this pull in a conscious way. And I'm serious when I say that I've struggled with this, and to the day struggling with this, and that's why you're not getting any righteous recipe about how exactly to do this. I intend at least never to give you that, because I feel that's I'm done with righteous recipes, is what I named it. But any like moralization about how to do things, any advice giving. So, because I've had the advice many times because I've signed up for different online courses and resisting sugar themes. And what they say is, you have to realize, what emotion is it that you're trying to avoid right now that you want chocolate? And that, I mean, let's just say that that's true. But let's then say that it's a simple kind of truth. And it's super annoying when you are addicted and all you want is that chocolate. And there's no emotions here other than I just want chocolate. And that is really what I want to talk about today. That kind of addiction, that there are all of these reasons underneath, and we're going to look at those. I'll call them adaptations. But once you are hooked, it's also like a physical dependency thing, right? It's this urge to do something that doesn't anymore has to do with whatever you're feeling. And again, we can hold it as a true statement. The other thing that, I might crave it more if I'm feeling certain emotions, sure. But I've never had any help from that advice. And it's been given to me in proportionally a lot. It's been given to me without my willingness to receive it. So I guess that's part of the problem too. So I'm pretty sure it's a true statement, and that well-intended people are giving this, and it might work for a lot of people. So if you've never heard it before, I'm going to just give it to you. But it's never worked for me. So the advice is, once you're feeling the craving, once you're feeling the urge to eat or smoke or whatever your addiction, your obsession is, then you have to ask yourself, what is it that I'm feeling? And then go feel that instead, right? I'm not the best at giving this advice, because I think you can hear in my voice that is, for me, it's too simplistic. It's too simplistic once you're at that point where addiction is enslaving my energy towards food and sugar, and for you it could be any other object, and I'm obsessed about it, and yeah, it's ruining my life. It's ruining relationships, it's ruining health, but it's also just a strategy. It's an adaptation. It's not a moral failure. It's not a failure of willpower. Well, I guess it is. It's not like you're showing how great your willpower is. I mean, it is a failure of those things, but really it's just not a place where willpower is going to work for very long. I'm trying to say that there are other dynamics going on here. And just some background on what I do think about these soothing adaptations, because I do agree with people, saying it's not about the actual, what you are obsessed with, what you've attached your hopes and ideals to, the substance that's gonna save you. It's not about that. Completely agree. It's not about the candy for me. I'm laughing because it seems like such a childish thing, but that's I guess it just becomes really visible, evident here, when it's candy that's sort of disgustingly enough made for kids, right? But with all of our adaptations, it was sort of made for a younger part of us to soothe something, and it worked out for a while there. And I think addiction is like that. It was relevant at one point, but it's not anymore. And you can look at it through what I study, developmental trauma, that when you move into adulthood without a stable sense of self, then your capacity for agency, for example, is impaired. Different capacities are impaired for relationships too, for self-regulation too, and for agency. So instead of us with unresolved complex trauma, I feel myself in that category for sure, has learned to blame and attack ourselves because we feel that we are wrong. Remember the first chapter I made in this podcast? It's all a blur, but I remember I said a lot of things, but what I wanted to say, maybe I should redo it, but what I wanted to say is that this feeling of being wrong inside is not true, and it's an internalization of the environment. It can even be the generations behind you, but all of these things that are not you. So this is again what I'm talking about, that from an early age, like earlier than we can remember, we've learned to blame and attack ourselves because we feel that sense of I am wrong, and that's makes it shameful to be you then, right? If you are wrong, then that's shameful, and you have to hide it, and then that opens the portal for, well, not the good magic portal that we often talk about, but like the portal for demons maybe to come in and say, okay, you're so shameful about who you are, you can hide all of these secrets too, and you can have this double life, this double standard. And it's not true that you have to be ashamed about who you are, of course, but again, it's the internalization of the environmental failures, meaning the failures of our environment when we grew up. Could be the parents, but also like the people around. And that internalization, meaning it's inside of you, that becomes the working model of our sense of self. Okay, so whatever was done to you, you are now doing to yourself. You're saying, that's who I am, that's what I deserve. I can't even see above it. If I start to think, what do I want for myself? I'm saying, I can't even see how that's possible for me, because it's so internalized. That's what it means. When it feels like that inside, it's really difficult to listen in the present, right? Being here and now, it's difficult to listen, and it's difficult to know and to regulate ourselves. So that is the journey that you're on when you have complex trauma. And I'm just giving you the negative here, because we're talking about what could be the possible cause of something like food and sugar addiction. It feels hopeless when you are in that place, and we're gonna revisit the hopeless place when we talk about the Piscean archetype, but just a little more on how these adaptations work. It's when we as children, we don't feel safe. We are not safe to connect to our authentic emotions. And I'm saying we, but I hope you can just hear it as you or they, because we're all from different backgrounds, right? And some have been able to, of course, connect to authentic emotions and don't have. So this is in particular for people with developmental trauma that I'm talking about, right? So when we were not safe to connect to authentic emotions, then we stopped communicating through the emotions about what we need. And that's why today, as adults, many of us are aware of anxiety, this bodily experience that something is completely off. But anxiety is really a signal for an unmet need. It's an indirect emotion. It's an unresolved emotional communication. It could be a protest, could be anger underneath. And it's communicating to the environment that this is not okay, what's going on is not okay. But because we are not safe to connect to those authentic emotions, it seems strange, and we may go into our heads and become all concerned, what's going on in my body, and am I crazy? You can just put layers upon layers on this experience, and really the internal pattern of early trauma, which is what needs to be shifted here is around listening to oneself in the present moment in a new way. But because as a child, again, everything relates back to this poor childhood. When you go back, think about it. A child, you cannot feel both the anger and the love for the parent. So on the level of the nervous system, anger feels too threatening for a young child. It cannot be there together with all of this dependency and the love you have for the parent. And then the anger is turned toward oneself. And as we grow older, we often replace the anger with collapse, a resignation. And then only when reconnecting to anger again, we experience anxiety, right? So I think I've definitely lived from collapse and resignation completely. But then when there is anger, but then when there's something that's really upsetting to you, you may not, or I may not be able to feel it. And it may be experienced as anxiety instead. While it is really anger that's driving the anxiety, but we have shut down emotions, right? And emotions are supposed to get our needs met. And I'm confusing the me and you and the present time from the past time, because here we are, many of us, with this will to get rid of a part of us. And that can be dated back to the failure of the early environment, now internalized, where we shame ourselves for certain needs. And we think what's wrong with us is really this one part of us is wrong. And but that is really what, because of this internalization. And what shame means is parasympathetically shutting down to protect a young part of us. So it is complex. I think I'm like trying to explain a few things in a mix here. But it's just it so often happens both with my clients and inside myself that I just want to get rid of this part of me, right? But we need to acknowledge that that's not the solution. That's not on our growth process, because getting rid of something is what you internalized. That is what someone sort of did to you by letting you know. All of this can be very unconscious, very indirectly, can be just because you have this culture and then you do things this way, and then the little child interprets it this way. It's very unconscious. But so in some way you communicate as the parent is communicating to the child that the child has to shut down parts of themselves, right? Emotions. So when you sit in therapy and say, I just want to get rid of this part of me, I hope that you see that it actually more relates to what someone did to you once, rather than what can help you grow. So addiction is yet another, I want to say, active, full-fledged abuse done to yourself. Done to oneself, nailing oneself to what turns out to be an illusion. And let me just real quick read what I found on a website for an addiction center. It said, in addiction, we mistake numbness for peace, indulgence for abundance, gratification for fulfillment, intensity for intimacy, control for safety, perfection for competency. So if you didn't hear, this is what we mistake. This is a mistake, right? We mistake numbness for peace, for taking that one. Wow, right? So when I'm filled with candy, I have candy all over in my mouth, in my stomach, in my bed. I'm just being honest with you right now, because that's actually what has tended to keep me having this feeling of safety. That's actually just numbness. That's making you not feeling anything. And it is also, like they say, control for safety. It is a way of controlling. So it sounds very likely. I don't know the evidence base for this, but it sounds likely. And I think if you took all of them, you could maybe go through them for yourself and see how they relate to your situation. Indulgence for abundance. They're all good. They're pretty good, actually. Yeah. So, but I want to keep the context that food addiction is an adaptation to what we call environmental failures. So to the early adverse experiences. And when we want to heal that, we need to first understand, identify, and reinforce our own ownership of life instead, our agency, meaning that we need to raise awareness about the present ways we can relate to ourselves and others and find what we really want for ourselves. So to me, it is about ownership of one's life rather than just being emotionally reactive to whatever happens. And I think you listening, you're probably at the same playground as I am in some regard. I mean, I'm sure you also have this awareness of unconscious patterns that relates to past wounds but show up now, right? So that, if not, then that's the first step. However, the adaptive survival pattern, that's addiction, which has, so adaptive survival patterns, that's, something that's patterns that have been carried forward into adult life, right? And when it's addiction, I think it's even harder to beat. I mean, it's the same as any other adaptation because it hinders you directly relating to your internal states. And the basis for addiction is also self-shaming. But I'm just saying, I think it's a really tricky one because you have that, I mentioned before, the physical dependence. And now I'm just quoting from Wikipedia here. Physical dependence is a physical condition caused by chronic use of tolerance-forming drug in which abrupt and gradual drug withdrawal causes unpleasant physical symptoms. Yeah, so it's caused by this chronic use of a drug, and I am convinced that sugar is one of those drugs. And then when you are trying to stop, you withdraw, then it causes you to have very unpleasant physical symptoms, and that can go on for a long time. So you have a long time where you can potentially make this excellent excuse for yourself to just go back in. At least that's my experience, right? And yet I want to stay truthful about how we ourselves play an active role in organizing our reality. So I don't just look outside myself and think, oh, I'm a victim of uncontrollable forces. But I want to say it matters how I relate to my internal experience, even as there is this physical dependency. And even if I'm not aware, but we are constantly forming and shaping our internal worlds by the way we view and relate to external circumstances. So there is something here to be present to, even as it seems also just physically that our capacity for freedom and self-determination has been robbed by the addiction, by the physical reactions towards this drug. So being present is totally key, I think, from my own experience. And so it's totally key. And with this brain disease that I've heard it called, sugar addiction as a brain disease, that does not make meditating easy at all. If it's not easy in the first place, then if you're addicted to something, it's not easy at all. So in the research for this topic, I read an article from 2008, where it seems like that's the year where we got the evidence. That's even the title of the article, Evidence for Sugar Addiction. So yeah, it's called Evidence for Sugar Addiction, Behavioral and Neurochemical Effects of intermittent excessive sugar intake. And I know for you English native speakers, you're going to understand these words, but I'm just going to translate the words that I didn't know what meant. So even intermittent, it apparently means it's not steady. So this can both be, for me, sugar addiction has been very steady, very chronic, like every day, apart from the periods of my life where I've tried to stop. I have stopped for like years. I don't know if years in plural, at least 1 year. I should have written it down actually. But yeah, so also intermittent, but then also excessive sugar intake. That's how I understand it. But of course I can't tell you everything in that, and it was little pieces of it was really interesting, but there was also just a lot of numbers and references that there are in articles like that. But I can just read the conclusion. How do you feel about that? It's not very long. Let's do it. This is the conclusion from the article of 2008, Proving Sugar Addictions. From an evolutionary perspective, it is in the best interest of humans to have an inherent desire for food for survival. I love that. I actually just love that. Because it's been one of the things that I've thought about doing this chapter, is like, but hunger, it's so real, right? And it's so important. So, yeah, okay, back to the conclusion. I'm just going to read it again. It's in the best interest of humans to have an inherent desire for food for survival. However, this desire may go awry, and certain people, including some obese and bulimic patients in particular, may develop an unhealthy dependence on palatable food that interferes with well-being. Now, I did not know what palatable food means, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but as I've found out, it's junk food. I'm just going to say junk food. Okay, it's just a lot of sugary food. Okay, the concept of food addiction materialized in the diet industry on the basis of subjective reports, clinical accounts, and case studies described in self-help books. The rise in obesity, coupled with the emergence of scientific findings of parallels between drug of abuse and junk food, has given credibility to this idea. The reviewed evidence supports the theory that in some circumstances, intermittent access to sugar can lead to behavior and neurochemical changes that resemble the effects of a substance of abuse. According to the evidence in rats, intermittent access to sugar and food, it's also CHO, and food is capable of producing a dependency. This was operationally defined by tests for binging, withdrawal, craving, and cross-sensation to amphetamine and alcohol. So they compared both the binging, the overeating, and then also the withdrawal symptoms here to amphetamine and alcohol. So the correspondence to some people with binge-eating disorder or bulimia is striking, but whether or not it is a good idea to call this a food addiction in people is both a scientific and societal question that has yet to be answered. What this review demonstrates is that rats with intermittent access to food and sugar solutions can show both a constellation of behaviors and parallel brain changes that are characteristics of rats that voluntarily self-administer addictive drugs. So evidence is sugar can be addictive. Right. Okay, great. Thank you, science. I guess at that time, it was important to figure out scientifically. But I mean, that was too late for many of us, wasn't it? I mean, by then, I had died, if you will, many times by overdosing sugar. My life had collapsed many times. I'm not blaming sugar. I'm saying this is one of the elements. I've plenty of other things to blame. No, seriously, this research, I'm sure it has helped. And hopefully for individuals like me to seek help, because this phenomena can really just be in the background if you want it to be there. And mostly we just want it to be in the background. because we don't really want to stop. And especially if you don't get so overweight that it blocks you from anything too important in the day-to-day life. Because if you are very, very overweight and you can't get out the door, then it's different. That's when I started. In the beginning, I said that's actually not the issue. I'm trying to limit myself. Don't go there. My mom was very overweight. I'm more of a, if you want to know, I'm more of a slender type, of like a fat, thin type. But then I have this stomach, belly that people think that I'm pregnant in the 11th month or something. And I can hide it, you know. Often I don't want to hide it because I hate that there should be any beauty standard at all. I don't want to adhere to them. But I'm just saying that so if it's not like you have to have help being transported out of your apartment or something like that, then it can be very much in the background, especially if you're constantly being permitted this behavior. Let's say in TV shows where food is often visible, or maybe the character on the TV show is stealing something by eating ice cream at night, and I'm talking about me, you're like collecting evidence that this behavior is fine, it's normal, it's helpful, it's all good, I'm just gonna keep eating, right? And it's masking the fact that, of course, it's not helpful in the first place where this character is doing it, but then in the movie maybe she's doing it because she just had a heartbreak. You know, they want to show you're sad and you soothe yourself by this self-destructive behavior, but then what you're doing is you are actually doing this every night, and it's not just one ice cream, you know, it's the whole fridge and stuff like that. It's like you're just masking it because it's partly normal. Do you understand? So yeah, hopefully this research has helped for it to be thought of more. Yeah, I don't want to say this, but in a more pathological way. We always want to go from don't pathologize to actually normalize. But in this case, it's also important to see there's actually something here. I mean, it's funny with hunger, as I mentioned when I was reading the quote. Sorry about that. But actual hunger can also go away, right? When you put your mind to it, if you feel like I'm so hungry, I just need food right now, and then something happens, you have a conversation with someone, and it can go away. It's weird like that, but it's important to feel hunger because it's a matter of survival. And yeah, there are all of these reflections. Actually, I shouldn't continue looking at the clock here because I have an overflowing brain, and I could go different directions with hunger. Hunger as a phenomena. It's so interesting because it's both survival, it's also pleasure, and it's also some people die because of hunger. I have to stop myself. Stop, because if I'm explaining what I mean, then it's gonna take too long. Stop it. Okay, let's not extend into that. Let me not mention the novel I read from 1890 called Hunger. Okay, so I used to not take this up in therapy. It's just taking the time here. Okay, we're all good. I used to not take up this theme. I've not taken it up a lot. Addiction. Well, I have, I think, maybe 10 times. Let's say I have 10 times, but that's not a lot to me in therapy. But as throughout the years, I'm saying, and the reason why it's been hard to say to the therapist, I kind of want to be free from my addiction, is the ambivalence. The ambivalence is I'd like not to be addicted most days, but all days I want to eat the exact same thing. I don't want to stop eating. I just want to stop all the consequences. The effect on body, on mood, all of that, kind of wanted that to stop, but kind of did not want to stop reaching for sugar. So I had this feeling that sugar was my friend. And when I was really down, it might have been the only friend. I remember this quite clearly from 2016 when I took this, I don't know, is it called education or a course or whatever, but I studied to become a coach. So it's a coach certification. And it was a period of sugar. I had been clean before. I had been clean prior to that, but that year, that particular time, I was definitely into sugar. And at the school here, we were asked to describe the best thing in our lives, what made us most grateful, something like that. What is making you the most grateful? What is it that you really, really love when you think about? And I said chocolate, and I kind of specified which chocolate I was talking about. I'm not going to do that disservice now, but I really was saying it's this particular chocolate. It has this coating, it has this inside. And the teacher was very tolerant and accepted whatever we said. I think especially because she felt that I was kind of ashamed of this too. I mean, I didn't just lean into it and tell everyone how much I enjoyed this piece of chocolate. I was also frustrated that that is the thing that I thought of the first, and that is the actual thing that I found most grateful. I found myself being most grateful for. Yeah. So, but she was helping with her very tolerant attitude to making me more okay with it too. But it did strike me later that's actually the addiction talking. That's not me. That's the addictive part, right? It can be chocolate, it can be chips, it can be candy, whatever sweetness. That was disguised as a friend to me. It was disguised as comfort and a pleasure-giving substance. That part. So again, I'm changing between now and then, present time, past time. And this particular thing about it being a friend is definitely in the past. But is it pleasure-giving? Yeah. In the present, I can relate to that. Yeah. But the thing that's definitely in the past is that I felt it was a pleasure-giving substance that I could not live without. I would never have overcome all of that because, for example, I've been homeless, right? I think it's it must have been my greatest obstacle in life, because being homeless is, like you can't function. And so during that time, I would say if I did not have some candy in my pocket, I wouldn't have overcome without that. And I'm saying that I wouldn't have overcome without you. You're a friend, you're a comfort, you're giving me pleasure that I can't live without. I'm saying that to a drug that releases opioids and dopamine, and then, of course, creates more battles for me. And which also mask who I really am, because it numbs me. It makes me less sensitive to what's actually going on in my life. I mean, what a friend, right? What a friend. So then I think a couple of years after that experience at the coach education, I went to a psychotherapist who specialized in binge-eating and sugar addiction. I was like, great, I'm going to make the investment, because she cost $350 US. I actually looked it up. That is the price for 50 minutes. So that's pretty expensive, and it's not even astrology. But realizing, okay, if I was actually able to now let go of it, it would have been worth it, right? And when I came there, it was pretty strange, because I had just changed my name to Manna. My name was Maria before, and I changed it to Manna. And she said that, oh, well, now you've changed your name, so you're probably not going to have an eating problem. Now you are Manna. I kind of saw the therapeutic method doing that, kind of splitting my personality into, now you're Manna, no more Maria, now you're Manna. And I was like, I'm not exactly sure I'm buying that, but I kind of tried to. I was really willing and open, and I mean, I'm sure there was resistance in there, but no conscious resistance, because I just wanted it to go away now. I had been fighting for so many years. I wanted it to go away. I had given her more than I had. I was I homeless? No, I think at that time I've been in an abusive relationship, actually. That's the time. Not that it makes it a lot better, right? So in a sense, maybe in an internal sense, I was still homeless, right? So, but then she also told me that sugar isn't all bad, she said, because it actually helps you concentrate, and she just wanted me to know that. Like, if you can't concentrate, you can eat some sugar, and then you'll have your focus, is what she said. And I'm sure she must have said a lot more, but for some reason, this is the two things that I remember, which is not great. That's just not great. And that's, I'll just blame my memory, because I'm sure she did something incredible that I just don't remember. But the session had an opposite effect, because I just took that advice in and said, okay, sugar, I have to concentrate. And often when I read, this is just standard for me, often when I read, I fall asleep. I feel like falling asleep, right? And then, I can do sugar. And then that actually became a new habit, because I had not used that excuse before. And now I could take her words, use it as an excuse for myself, saying, but it's only when I have to focus. How often do I have to focus? Well, only in the morning, midday, and evening, so it's not a lot, right? And how many bags of candy are you gonna eat? Well, I have 2 bags. I'm gonna just buy some more, and I guess something like that would be sensible to another. That's what I meant about addictive personality. So to another person who could limit herself, I have a friend, she's Aquarius, but she has a lot of earth, and she can just take 1 piece of chocolate, and I'm like, what's going on? Are you only, can I, I'm trying to repress the need to ask, can I have more? Can I have the rest of the the chocolate bar then? Are you only going to take 1 piece? What's wrong with you? That's, yeah. So it has a lot to do with myself. But okay, I just wanted to tell you what I have done for this addiction. That's actually the section we are in right now. Because I haven't really gotten serious help for my addiction. I mean, I'm helping myself for sure, but I don't know how easy it is actually to get help with this thing. I think you have to do it yourself. I did find some online courses, as I said, with healthy living. I've done that since, but that's also before this. That was in 2013, actually. It's a long time ago. And around that time, in 2010, around that time, that was also the period of a great crisis with small children and all of that. But actually around that time I managed to live pretty healthy. I was pretty strict on myself, and I think that was due to a lot of guilt. So I was able to restrict myself like that. See, this is so interesting, right? With the food, how it employs all of these psychic dynamics that, for better or worse, trying to manage our nourishment. It's, yeah. But, I mean, it didn't last for long, because I couldn't prepare the food that were on these courses because of my own chaos in terms of not having a steady place. And I just moved incredibly a lot. So I didn't have stuff so that I could cook like that, or energy, or just mental resources, I'm sure, but also like in a practical sense that I couldn't at that time. But what I could have done for sure was to give up the addiction part, to give up the sugar part, because I would not have died from that. Absolutely, I could have done that. But then when you want to go all in on something, it actually means also really up-leveling the healthy products in your diet, right? And then that just became too much. But I did it for some time. And I think that is important when you look at your timeline back. I think it is important to realize, okay, here I made a shift. And for me, that was the first time that I shifted. I'm pretty sure. Maybe a little earlier. Yeah, actually, maybe a little earlier. I think maybe earlier. I tried. I remember I tried in my early 20s. I remember all the church volunteer stuff where they would put on cookies and cakes and chocolates for the volunteers. I would say, can we have some fruits and nuts instead? So I actually remember that I did try. So that was even before I got married. Whoa. So maybe around 19 or something. Okay. But so it's still a long time. Let's say I've gone 18 years in full sugar and then starting to fight it. And I will not advise anyone to actually go into it as a fight. I'll tell you that personal growth is now a centerpiece in my life. It is definitely a centerpiece of my life. And so, to some that might sound perfectionistic, but it's really not about perfecting anything. It's about keeping up with my demons, continuing to look at them and to try to understand and to try to help myself. And we're talking about what we could also call emotional eating, right? Because you eat what makes you feel good, at least in the short term. It's not actual hunger, but it's more of an emotional hunger. So let's go into that. Food addiction. Again, I'm going to say food addiction or addiction to sugar, overeating, and it could be any other addiction for you. It's this attempt to make myself feel better through an external substance. So the addictive behavior is aiming at making me feel better, which is totally legitimate, right? But the attempt is displaced or misguided. And it really comes from having had this habit for such a long time. Since maybe before you were born, if we're talking about epigenetic, and like you were like swallowing it as a fetus, even all of, well, the addictions, the traumas. And so because of that timeline, and because it happened so early, you've come to this point of total dependency on sugar, which in phases of my life has led me to accept the addiction. So I said before, I don't recommend fighting it, but let me assure you that I don't recommend accepting the addiction either. Because I don't know, I don't want to regret that I've done it, because it's actually, again, it's been a strategy that's sort of helped for a little while until it certainly did not. But so one strategy for me was accepting my digestion is just compromised. That's just how it is. Okay, I'm just accepting I'm gonna feel constant craving, and so I just need to keep buying candy. I know I do feel nauseous afterwards. I know all of these consequences, but I just need to have candy everywhere, hidden everywhere, so I can reach it when I need it. Always be prepared with sugary foods and just, tons of candy around the house. So in those acceptance periods, I've given up the fight and I've succumbed. So it could have been actually part of my healing now that I just think of it as I speak to you. Noting that I have not achieved victory over my addictions yet. So I don't know, but just there's been some satisfaction, at least, in just completely succumbing to the pull, just completely doing what it said, just and it has had like a natural effect of, okay, now I'm just, at least I'm gonna have a few hours now with no sugar, because that was a lot. But yeah, it's not helped either. Let's just agree on that. It's not helped to just accept it and just do what the pull wanted you to. But I've had it for so many years that at times in these phases where I have been very addicted, it has seemed like a part of me. And that's related to something quite interesting around character structures that I'm working on that. I'm gonna absolutely make a chapter on that one day, but I don't think it's gonna be anytime soon, because it's a big one. I'm like, what part of our personality, is there any part of our personality who we are. So those are the kind of, that's just one question actually. That is the kind of question that I'm dribbling with in my mind, but I'm gonna need more information before I dare say anything about it. So, but it's addiction to sugar. It's very real still in, let's say, periods of my life where it seems just impossible to replace it with something else. And because that's also a strategy to conquer this, right? Is to say, okay, so you can't have the candy that you want. Now let's go and use, what is it called? Sucrin. I don't know if it's called that in English. But there are all of these sugar alternatives. I just turn around to my kitchen because I have that stuff too. But again, it's just incredibly hard to have these withdrawal reactions, and excuses can come so easily because it is not heroin or something like a lot of people will say, don't do it. It's something where a lot of people say, don't you want one more, right? And oh, we are eating this to celebrate. So there's so many occasions where what you have said steadily and firmly to yourself, I'm not going to do it, that can be changed a little bit. It's like, oh, well, I can't do it on Wednesdays, or I can't do it on Fridays, and all of that. So I have definitely been completely numb. I've told you before that I have been dissociated for a long time from myself, from my life. So addictive behavior is a great companion to dissociation. So that's definitely been the deal for the longest of time, and my body has suffered from it a lot. Like my mood has suffered. My group of people, my friends, have suffered from it for sure. So, but that's not my life today. I want to say that. It's not my life today. Today I care for myself and for my soul, and part of caring is what we're doing now. We are looking at the blind spots if we can. I guess per nature, per definition, we can't look at the blind spots. We're trying to. So we are talking about addiction, to put it into the light and not, just hide it under the bed, which is what I've done most of the time. But the deal is we get hooked by something external to feel better. Now, to feel better and also to overcome aspects of yourself, that is actually the purpose of spiritual pursuits. So I want to continue to just talk about how spirituality relates to addiction. I read I think it was on that same treatment center's website, might have been another one, sorry about that. But the quote is that those suffering from addictions are fascinated by spirituality, and more than 1,500 research articles have shown increases in spirituality that are positively correlated with addiction recovery. Yeah, to me it's a little bit complicated because recovery, which is bound up with the 12-step program, I'm concerned. I haven't tried it, so how can I say? But to me it smells like something very familiar, and so I'm afraid that it's just using broken people who are looking for a direction. And you can argue that the 12-step direction is better, that religious living is better than overdosing. Sure, perhaps. And it's again a topic, I'm just not going to go there. Because I might actually be very prejudiced here. I think I am. But what I want to look at is the connection between the addictive personality and the spiritual inclination. Because when we look to Pisces, here it is, Pisces, the archetype. And so the archetype meaning it's Pisces, it's Neptune, and it's also the 12th house. And you can be a Pisces like I am by your sun sign, but you can also have a lot of planets in the 12th house, or you could have Neptune right on your ascendant, or something else that is going to make you a Piscean person. So just if you are listening to this and relating it to yourself, just know that there can be several signatures where this is going to be the deal. And I found this topic to be so interesting in many years now, this how addiction is related to spirituality. And it's certainly not because I want to idealize or romanticize addiction, because addiction is, like we said before, it's due to trauma, it's due to early heartbreak, either for you or maybe generations back. But what we do learn when we look to the Pisces archetype is more around, just more around this energy. And this energy is raw, untamed. And in Pisces, you have life experiences that you really thought was true, and it turned out not to be because it's about illusion. So the Neptunian lesson in life is that things are not as you hoped they were. We need to look at reality rather than the ideals. But of course, reality relates to something like Saturn, and Saturn Capricornian people are the most depressed. So I'm not saying all reality. It's everything's a balance, right? But let's try and put some more words to what is Pisces. So the initial starting point for Pisces is purity, being unrefined, being primal, and it's the womb state. The womb state, lying there inside your mother, and just being given all the nourishment that you need. And that is then what plays out as an adult with this archetype, that you just go with the flow because you yourself are not informed, and you just trust because you think someone else has the overview, and you don't know where you're going, and you're inside the jungle and you're lost, but you don't see it. This is the starting point. It is a starting point of being very neglectful because of ignorance. And the more you are bewildered and not in control, the easier it is for something or someone else to get control over you. And that something or someone can have a great interest in you staying in that confused, uneducated state where you don't know what to do about your problems. So instead, you do what? You numb out. So that's one place where addiction comes in. And now they can control you. So this archetype is very related to addiction, because it's that mismanagement. It's about not taking charge. And then if you go a little bit deeper, Pisces is about being egoless. It's about being egoless. And it's this drifting state where this is now, I'm explaining the starting point, meaning it's where you don't have a lot of consciousness. It's not elevated yet. So in the beginning, you don't know how to defend yourself, meaning you don't have boundaries, you don't have protection, and you don't know about maintenance. And we just say yes, because, right, let's just do whatever it is. So we haven't even learned the word no yet. No as a word that actually separates us, right? And this is because the expectations that we have from the womb, the expectations that everything is going to happen on its own and we just adapt. And when there's pain, we swallow the pain. We don't say it. We just adapt, just go with the flow, just do what we do. And then these emotional dependencies develop because we need to cope with the bad situations we're in. So this neglectful state of mind it's interesting because it can either be because of substances or lead us to the substances, sugar, food, objects we're attached to. I think it's both. It makes us neglectful, and it's also where it leads us. It's a vulnerable state where the tendency is to idealize others Just getting flashbacks to what I was saying in the beginning around interviews. But idealize others in such a way that you feel smaller than them, and that you then feel like you just have to obey them. You have to obey the authorities, right? So I'm hoping you get a sense of this starting point for Pisces. Just being in the room, just like whatever they say, you're just gonna do that. And it's not easy, because you can find yourself in very terrible situations, and your only coping mechanism is, well, putting something inside of you to not feel the pain. Now, in terms of spirituality, this is the egolessness we hear about in spirituality, right? So because of that, we are more open to also spiritual authority, but then that's manipulation, and that's what I kind of remarked about in terms of the 12th step, which I could be very worried about, because then I'm not saying the 12th step, but not just in general. If you're just in this energy I just described, and then you're open to spiritual authority and you're doing what they're saying, then that's manipulation, and it's not true, and it's not authentic spirituality. So, right, that the universe provides everything, okay? We can say yes to that, but then the ego needs to be developed. So with an ego, you will know how to use what the universe provided. Ego means individual consciousness. It means being separate. It means being autonomous. It means being you, to have an I at all. And if you don't, then you don't have free will, and you don't have control, and then you fade out because of neglect. So this archetype really reminds us that we can't stay in the room, but we need to go out on our own. And then we can have trust and all of that. But it requires what is called a psychological birth, really. So we're challenged to develop away from the automatic passivity in Pisces, because if we don't, the consequences are grand. It's parasites will come and take over if we don't care for ourselves. So the universe, again, gives us everything, but what it doesn't give is a manual of how to live. So in Pisces, a lot of mistakes are made. And usually then spirituality is found, but not until you realize that you need to stop whatever it is, whatever addiction it is. And then you realize that if you don't take care of yourself, then no one will. And hopefully you also realize how important that is, that how worthwhile you are. And that is really the change we then see in people when they go from learned helplessness, we've spoken about that, I think, in another chapter, I'm pretty sure, to agency, where people are more able to support themselves when challenged, and they have a more robust experience of life energy, because now they can express their individuation, and their sense of self is more stable. And that means then, when you have it's actually in terms of symbols, it's going from the Pisces starting point and then crossing the ascendant into Aries. This is the birth. So once you have that, then when you feel needs and emotion and states that are tied up with old survival adaptive patterns that we spoke about, then when you feel that, then you're able to process them easier. And you don't have to go into the addictive pattern. And I know this from the inside out. And it's truly like being born into internal freedom. Of course, as we know, the automatic is strong. So it's a daily practice. It's not like this, one day I was just there. It's a daily practice of giving yourself new choices in response to genuine intentions. Right? Rather than the automatic shutting it down and just reaching for what your now body physically really craves and longs for. So okay, I'm leaving Pisces, and I'm never leaving Pisces, of course, but just leaving the subject for now. And I just want to go a little bit back. We don't have long to go, so stay with me. Stay with me. You can do it. The subject of the consequences of the intake of sugar. That is really the price of innocence that we just spoke about in Pisces. It's the price for not being taught how to handle emotions. I mean, the dysfunctions, the drain of energy, not being able to concentrate is some of the consequences to a lack of mastery, and the pull to satisfy the urge is not a healthy coping strategy. But the cause behind the pull towards sugar is very important, because that is a human need to fill yourself with something good rather than painful, which reality often is, right? So what is that we really want to fill ourselves with? And again, this whole understanding of you missing something or having a hole inside of you can be totally misused and manipulated by religions and whoever is trying to sell you something. So I just have some theory, but I don't know, and don't join a cult on the basis of what I'm saying, okay? Promise. So, but I think we can say that most people long for a sense of divine love. Because, okay, I'm not done with Pisces yet, actually. When we were in the womb, we experienced that kind of peace. And it gets complicated again in my overflowing brain here, because I'm also thinking when we were in the womb, probably we were also swallowing all of these traumas, right? Okay, so even before that, let's go further back. And I have no idea where we are, but before we were in the womb, before, there we experienced divine peace, which is why we know the feeling that we want inside. And so reaching out for the sugar, whatever drug you prefer, can be seen as a reaching out for that ultimate satisfaction in that peaceful paradise that we know, that we now try to recreate to feel better. And so how I link spirituality and addiction is just that we're trying to recreate a spiritual experience that we had way before we came into being. We were beings, but then not human beings. Where you're just home and it's all good. All of that joyful awareness, all of that peace of just ultimate satisfaction, that is actually what the substance, the attached to object, is supposed to give you. But we can't just stay in that bliss for once. I mean, also, it's not ever going to give you that, but we know that part, right? I started out saying, we know we are at that same playground. We know that it's actually not going to give us that satisfaction, but it sure feels that way. And we do have excuses enough. I have so many excuses. I should actually do a whole episode just with the excuses to eat. But one of those excuses is definitely gonna make us think that sure, I can live like this forever because it's actually just fine. But we can't stay in that bliss either, even if it was blissful with that substance, because we have to birth ourselves. What about that psychological birth? What about becoming ourselves, right? And Pisces people so often long for having more peace. But what we really need is to become conscious so we can create an authentic alignment with maybe very similar ideals, actually, right? This is the confusing part, where you hear ideals in spirit, in some cult, right? You hear they're pretty good ideals, they have pretty good norms, but then they're just all of this shit underneath, right? So that's kind of the same thing here, where again, you want to be in alignment with peace and joyful awareness and all of that, but you want to be it from a place where you can actually handle the difficulties of life, and you cannot inside religion. You can if you want to stay there, but okay, that was a miss. Back on track. Okay, so if we want to handle the difficulties of life, it requires that we take an honest inventory and inquire into whether the aim here is fulfilled, or whether the attachment to food and sugar is bringing us further from our center. And I know what my answer is, and I'm sure you do too, because of bitter experiences. And I got a lot of Pisces going on, so yeah, I have the tendencies, but they have been transformed from a complete naivety to fuse with something or someone, just complete naivety. I've been that way in the world, to now I'm consciously taking steps towards feeling better, rather than only the unconscious attempts. That's really based on, it's really based on my childhood and what was given to me in order for me to shut up when I was a child. It's a really harsh thing to think about, that it's actually someone did this to you just so you would stop annoying them, and now you're treating yourself that way. That's actually really harsh. So emotional hunger, the reason exactly with the misuse of food, what is causing it? I'm just thinking out loud. Do you have an answer? It has a pervasive place of eating, right, in human life. It's our earliest activities to eat. It's connected to comfort, to being soothed from we are small, and there's a whole culture around us, marketing culture, selling us addictive food. So some businesses will have returning customers. So yeah, Pisces just take everything in, but really for everyone, it's not just Pisces, because Pisces is actually also related to the zeitgeist and what's going on in the ether. What's going on for everyone. So it's actually everyone who is personally affected by the zeitgeist, right? What is popular in society at the moment, and we just come to know about different soda drinks, for example, like it was just normal, and we forget that someone invented that. Probably not a non-profit. So for me, thinking about the cause of my sugar addiction is that I was raised with sugar. It was very effective for me not to cry when I got candy. It was like, that's what I wanted, rather than being with you jerks. I'd rather just go and eat candy. And so that just grew and grew and grew, and in all secrecy I was hiding candy all over as a child, and it just meant everything to me. On birthdays, do you think that the play? Did you think that the other people mattered? No, it was all about the candy, I'll tell you. And I wouldn't go even to a friend's house if I knew that they were not eating candy. Yeah, so I got rid of that one, right? Because I just told you I have a friend who's eating. Yeah, it's scary how little sugar she eats, but it's a Virgo rising for sure. So I got rid of that one, right? But I'm just saying, as a child, it was so ingrained in me. It was constantly on my mind, and I had related this object of sugar to peace, comfort, and how to deal with myself, self-regulation, right? And I was not thriving as a child, to say the least. So I was constantly thinking about how could I get more candy so that I could feel a little better. And it ran amok, and it got to a point where I started to steal money to buy candy. And of course, shortly after, I was caught doing that. And then the whole guilt trip, becoming militantly fundamentalistic religious after that because of all of that guilt. And then no one noticed, including myself, of course, but I was small, no one noticed the element of addictive behavior in that whole happening, that the guilt, of course, took away the criminal actions, but the guilt could not take away the addiction, you know. What happened there just centered around me, just be good, don't be bad, and then what was ignored was really the sugar, which was a big cause for the stealing. I don't know if I can say it made me do it, but I can say that it was an attempt to recreate paradise for sure. I would do whatever it took to get that stimuli where I could feel better than what I did. And that is a thing that to this day, it shows up in my life. And now the reason why I'm coming to you with this is because of the Venus retrograde, that for me is all about revisiting this theme of too much of a sweet thing, too much indulgence, which could be a shadow side of Venus. It's been really interesting to look at, also really tough. I now have a calendar where I cross out each day without sugar. Yeah. So it's definitely also hard when you've just been on one of these sugar phases. And it's funny to think about, again, with the character structure. Have I always just been more susceptible to addiction? Or is it that all of the sugar has made my character, saying that sugar started early, right? Has that just made my character more impulsive and less self-restraining? And this tendency for short-term decisions. I'm not sure, but my personality somehow just goes well hand in hand with addictive behavior. And I think it was only because religion was in my life for so long that I've not gone into something more dangerous. I kind of want to not say that because I'm actually trying to make a point that sugar is as dangerous and is as much of a suffering than other substances you can be addicted to. But then I do realize that it's I actually don't know. I need to read more research to say the sentence, but I kind of think that you can't overdose in the same way as you can on something else. But so in a way, but it's part of the problem. Also, I'm like saying, oh, I'm glad that I'm not addicted to something else, but that's actually also quite one of the problems, right? Because it's harder to take serious and it's harder to spot. But as we know from research, it is really, really addictive and it's really not good for you. So yeah, so I wonder what your story is about emotional eating, emotional hunger. I mean, my mom was very overweight and I grew up with that behavior. So yeah, it took a long time before I started to stop with sugar. I think it's so important to look at, because underneath what we are addicted to is a more authentic life for us, for sure. A more authentic life, a more authentic perspective, because the substance is really altering what we perceive. And I know that not from the few days that I've crossed off in my calendar this period, but in other periods that I've really come to see, okay, there was so much more for me when I'm not in this addictive behavior. And why does it come back is another question, because now we've circled around a little bit of the symbolic impulse here, the causes behind, the habits, the habitualness of this, the research, and now it's like, why does it come back? I mean, I said it's hard to withdraw, right? Because if you find the excuses in that time, then you're very vulnerable to just go back into the addiction. But I also think that because it's food, it can't be totally cut out of your diet. So you have to relate to it. And I have had again and again to relate to it in a new way, rather than leave it all together, which you could with, I guess, pills or something. But food, it's you kind of have to have it, so it's seriously uphill. And also, yeah, I did mention the culture that can often reward or celebrate the behavior of eating in some way or another, that we eat together, or you feel you're afraid that someone's going to feel offended that you don't eat their home cooked cookies or whatever. And so it's complicated when it's food like that. So in a way, I hate to end this admitting that for me it's not over. I've not achieved control over my own addictions. But that is the truth, and that's what we're doing in this podcast, right? We're doing the truth as much as we possibly can, okay? And then the truth, sometimes I want to say, luckily, can change. The excuses of addiction is definitely what has slipped in again and again, that I've then believed it's not so bad to eat this, actually. I'm just gonna do this little thing, and I don't even have a goal about about completely eliminating sugar. I don't know if it matters to you. It's just my private thing. I don't even have that goal, because that's too much of a goal. That's too, oh no. What I intend is to not have the snacks. That's my first step, but it is a big step. What I want to say is that I'm happy to give myself now worth enough to look at it. That's a positive side, because this Venus retrograde has also been a little bit, do I really have to look at that? I don't want to look at that. This is the one thing. And then all of the old lines comes up, even though, like I told you, I feel like the thing about it's being my only friend, that's definitely not on the table anymore, because I feel very happy with my life and with my friends now. But there are sentences like, it's the only thing that gives me pleasure. So all of that comes up during this Venus retrograde. But I am happy that we are looking at it and to value myself enough to do that, picking myself up and saying, let's live, not for the sugar. Let's not keep deluding ourselves, but start to work to start to stop, right? Start the work to overcome the apparent need that this is about escaping the current reality. So what is it in the current reality that I can, first of all, be with, and then can I do something about it? Rather than escaping into this pleasure bubble, which is an illusion. And I have a lifetime now of experiences of what not to do if you want to overcome it. But again, I don't want to give advice out. I'll just say that the most common thing that I've done is to start a war inside of me. Because there is that part of me that does not want to give it up. And I do believe, like it may not sound that way right now, but I do believe in the attainability of recovery for us who are struggling with unhealthy habits one or another. And I believe it has to do with the evolution towards mastery. I have that for the Pisces symbol. I think that while the wound is not totally healed, it's going to itch, right? And you want to scratch that itch like an automatic thing. And that is really what has happened to me is that, yeah, I could do the war for some time, and then I had to sleep. I had to rest. The war is really tough on you. And then blank out, and you've scratched it again, the thing that was itching. It's so automatic. And I've had like months pass with this addiction, and then realizing, wait a minute, I stopped doing that. I've heard smokers tell me this too, actually, but it's completely my experience too, that I've realized really late that I was actually supposed not to do this. Right. What happened? What happened was some kind of excuse that took over my thinking, the automatic pattern that are just really hard to change. So yeah, I'm in the last minutes of this chapter. I wish I could give you some concrete advice. If you're like, I just want sugar at that point, what do you want to do then? I don't want to tell you what to do. I can just be honest about what am I doing right now. I am trying to replace it with, or I am replacing it with kombucha. Is there sugar in kombucha? Yes, there is. And that's why I say I'm not trying to completely eliminate it, but it has 4 grams of sugar in them, and I drink 1 a day, so that's just fine. I just don't want to be controlled by sugar. It's not so much about eliminating it. And then also activity. When I feel like really I need some sugar, then it's because it's not, I don't know how to say it's because, but it correlates with being I'm not moving. Because when I'm moving, I don't know if I've ever had that when I'm moving. So it's, and I feel the complexity as I'm giving, and I'm not giving advice, okay? But I do feel the complexity even as I'm doing something that might sound like giving advice, because I don't want to say to anyone or myself, you should just always be on the move, right? That's kind of the opposite of a spiritual life. You want to have stillness. You want to, of course, have that too. But so what I do is Qigong. And I've done Qigong for a year now. And it's really helped me to reach what we can call the inner supply, the inner reservoir of energies, instead of depending on an outer. So I think it's very relevant when we talk about addiction. And again, it's not an advice because it might not at all be suitable for you. I'm just saying this is what I go to, and I would love to hear from you. I wonder, what do you do when you feel that hunger, but it's not a hunger for broccoli. It's not that you're hungry for anything healthy. It's the other kind of hunger. Then what do you do to take care of yourself in that vulnerable state? Feeling this old urge to leave reality and just eat it away. You can always reach me at my email. It should all be there in the show notes. So I hope that this was a little bit helpful for you, whatever you are dealing with. I'm excited for interviewing people next week. I have 3 interviewees lined up, and it might be all that's going to be for a while, and they might all cancel. I don't know. I hope not. Please don't cancel. But either way, I am going to take it easy. It's a promise to myself. I'm just going to meet people where they are. I'm not going to force anything, including the invitation process, because I have reached out to more people. They're just not returned to me. But yeah, I'm going to take it chill, and that's what I mean about self-development, growth, examining my life, that is a centerpiece now, because that's what it means, that in everything we do, we try to live intentionally, right? So yeah, just keep in touch with this place to call whole. That's my catchphrase. And catch you next time. Bye.